Hey everyone, this is Ravenous Blog and welcome to another general discussion series. So today's general discussion is going to be on what's your thoughts on the 90s nostalgia going on around the internet? Do you think it has gone too far to the point where you see 2000s kids act like they were part of the 90s? Or do you think it has been underdone? And the person who recommended me this video is Queen's Kid, so you could go and check out their channel in the description box below. So let's talk about this topic. What are my thoughts about the 90s nostalgia going on around the internet? Do I think it's going too far where the 2000s kids are starting to think they're from the 90s generation, or is it like not quite up there? Well, here's my opinion. Like I think there was a time once upon a time where back in the early 2000s through the, a bit before the mid 2000s, this whole 90s nostalgia was like overrunning the internet. Like we had a lot of people say, oh, we want the old 90s shows to come back on TV, or you know, we don't like these current shows now. And then you even have some 2000s kids saying, oh, we're 90s kids because we grew up with these 90s shows that happened to come out around the 2000s. But yeah, I think it was really strong around the early 2000s through the mid 2000s. It was pretty strong. Nowadays, I think it's more like it shifted to, there's more respect for the 90s nostalgia in a way, rather than, you know, having some later generations saying, oh, we're the 90s generation because we grew up watching this show. It's sort of like me saying, you know, if I because, you know, when I was younger, I used to watch shows like the Flintstones and Johnny Quest and the Munsters and Brady Bunch. But those were shows that came out in the 1960s, and I wasn't even born in the 1960s. So I'm a bona fide 90s kid. But that doesn't make me a 1960s kid just because I grew up watching the Flintstones, Johnny Quest, and all those shows. So, you know, there were some 2000 kids at the time, around the early 2000s through the mid 2000s, that were saying, you know, they are 90s kids too, because they grew up with the 90s shows that was still running during those times. But nowadays, you don't really hear a lot of current generation saying they're 90s kids anymore, which is, you know, yeah. Anyway, you don't hear a lot of 2000s or a lot of later generations saying they're 90s kids anymore, because at this point they kind of realize, you know, yeah, these were shows that we also grew up on, but that doesn't make us 90s kids just because we grew up with these shows. That just makes us like have more respect for these shows, or you know, we just like these shows because we just like them. You know, it doesn't matter if we're 90s kids or whatever. We like these shows just for the content they got. And with all these remakes and all these reboots and bringing back a lot of the 90s shows, you know, I think it's more like, you know, people nowadays have more respect for the 90s nostalgia, rather than saying, oh, we're 90s kids that you know, because we grew up with these shows, despite the fact that these shows aired in the 90s and the person who was saying that was born in the 2000s or born much later. But yeah, I think nowadays it's more like people have more respect for the 90s nostalgia, rather than saying, you know, we're 90s kids and stuff like that. So I don't hear a lot of people really say, oh, we're 90s kids anymore. So, you know, that's just means that a lot of people are just looking at these 90s shows and they either love it or hate it, or they just respect for what the 90s was able to bring to them. What these 90s shows was able to bring to them when they were kids. So that's my thoughts on all this. Like, I think with 90s nostalgia, there is a lot of it going on around the internet, but it's not to the same degree as it was like years ago, like in the early 2000s through the mid 2000s. Like, it's more like nowadays people just respect what the 90s nostalgia is all about, rather than say, you know, we were born in the 90s too, despite the fact that we grew up in the 2000s or whatever. So I think that there's a more, you know, a lot of people are able to see that line now about being a 90s kid and being a 2000s kid or whatever. The lines between the two are not so blurred anymore. It's more like a matter of respecting whatever nostalgia the past generation has. So what are your thoughts about this topic? Do you think that there's been a lot of 90s nostalgia going on around the internet? And do you think it's been going too far where later generations are saying, you know, we're 90s kids because we grew up with these shows, despite the fact that we grew up in another era? Or do you think there's not a lot of 90s nostalgia going on around the internet as it originally was? Please feel free to comment below, and don't forget to follow me on Twitter so I can keep you updated and any new videos I post up. And also, like my Facebook page, Rabbity's Blog's Best Comments. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. This is Rabbity's Blog, and I'll see you later.